after the war, we got a lot of things wrong just because we got technology that we could build higher and we could, build these great urban plazas.
Yeah.
People don't like them. They still like, streets and communities and squares.
Welcome back to the Earth Circle. If you're joining us for the first time, the Earth Circle is all about trying to answer the question, is there a version of the future that we all want to live in? And we've come here today to meet with somebody who knows a lot about how we're going to live in the future. It's actually the president of the RIBA, the Royal Institute of British Architects. So as we start in this first interview, we've focused on the role of the RIBA. Chris has taken over the presidency in September, and he's got a reputation of being a change maker. He's bringing in some very, very interesting new takes on the RIBA, and I think it's fair to say he's taking the RIBA out of the last generation and getting it ready for the next. Chris Williamson, thank you so much for finding the time for us today. Welcome to the Earth Circle. We're trying to find out whether there's a version of the future that we all want to live in. And as somebody who's spent his entire career building the world that we live in the future, you're also the president from RIBA, the Royal Institute of British Architects. If you want to just explain a little bit about yourself and also your role at RIBA, I believe the tagline is that you're building a better future or making the future a better place. Is that correct?
Well, it's a membership organisation for architects, and our charter goes back to 1834. So in a few years' time, we'll celebrate our 200th anniversary, and it's to promote architecture and the built environment and everything that goes with that. So it was a Victorian learned society.
Yep.
And I'm passionate about improving. I've always been fascinated about the future. From the time Neil Armstrong walked on the moon when I was 12, and I've always been interested in what the future is going to be like.
Yep.
And having this opportunity to try and influence our education and our whole approach to architecture and how it's changing is a great opportunity. And I know
throughout your career, you've been involved in some pretty amazing projects. You've even won a Queen's Award at one point, and I think you met the Queen very early on in your career. And I'd love to talk about that history that you have. But let's maybe start off now talking about RIBA.
Okay.
Why do you think RIBA's got such an amazing reputation around the world? There are lots of different international architects, but it seems like British architects, especially if they're registered with RIBA, it's a sign of quality, isn't it? No?
It is, and I always think that British architects are sort of more respected outside of Britain than they are. When I work in America, when I work in Australia or China, you're treated with a lot of respect, and often that's not the same here. And that's why I wanted to do this role. There's two things that really motivated me to try and change the way we present ourselves, is to regain the respect of the profession and the industry, and also to improve our wages, our salaries, our fees, and the two go hand in hand. And in order to do that, I think we need to get better as well. We need to overhaul our lifelong learning, make sure that we're continually improving, and then we can demonstrate our worth to society, to politicians and decision makers. But RIBA has been incredibly good to me in my career, and that's why I wanted to ensure that it's still doing the same thing for young architects in the future. And it's not just architecture, but it's every professional institute, whether it's medical or accountancy or law.
Yeah.
Youngsters these days aren't as interested in joining a professional institute. People in our office are really keen in improving themselves, so they'll do an MBA and they'll do extra qualifications to get to where they want to get in their career. So I'd like to change the way that the RIBA is perceived from being a membership club to being a badge of honour, a badge of excellence, and allowing people to curate their own career during their lifetime and really gain an expertise in something, whether that's sustainability or AI or management or embracing the whole breadth of the profession. At the moment, I think we put too much emphasis on the guy that does the sketch on the napkin and say he's the architect, whereas the architects have a multi-disciplinary role, and I think that's part of the reason why we've lost our influence, is we're seen as people that just make buildings probably a bit more beautiful than they might otherwise be. But I think politicians and decision makers don't realise. I know my friends have 40 years experience of cutting edge in hospital design, in school design, in laboratories or infrastructure in my case. And I don't think people appreciate that some architects have lots of different skills. And I think if they understood that more, we would have more influence and we'd be listened to more when it comes to planning major infrastructure routes or planning hospitals and making sure people get better quicker and those sorts of things.
Let's dive a little bit deeper into that, because, you know, for me, architects, I've said this for many years, this is not just today, but I think it's the only profession, maybe there's another one, but I mean, my wife's an artist and she needs to understand some things about technical stuff. You know, I've come through the technical route and have to understand a little bit about aesthetics, but when you look at architects, it seems to be the only career where you have to be able to get the left and the right side of the brain excelling. You've got to build something that is aesthetically pleasing, or at least that fits into the environment, and at the same time it can't fall down. If you look at one of my wife's art exhibitions, it shouldn't fall down for 3 days or 3 weeks, but you need to build things that are going to be there for years and that are functional, that people need to live in. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think, I mean, there is a broad spectrum. There are some architects that are great conceptualists, and I think at the end of the day, it's teamwork. It's very difficult to do everything. And you know, the advertising industry has a creative team, and then they have an accounts team that look after the contract, look after the client, make sure everything's being done on time. It's very difficult to do everything. It's a different side of the brain, and there's very few architects who have the whole range of skills that you're able to design, you're able to manage, you're able to put things together, and you're able to keep the client happy and look after the budget.
Yeah.
So you do, and increasingly these days you need a team. So in the same way that a GP doctor doesn't know, you know, he wouldn't be able to do a hernia operation, or he wouldn't be able to do a brain operation or a heart operation, but he needs to know which specialist you need.
Yeah.
Architects need to orchestrate the team, and I think that's one of. So in 1985, I did a project management degree, a master's degree, and the topic of my dissertation was why the architect is the best person to be the project manager, because they have the range of skills and they can manage the project well. But a lot of the tutors laughed at it because they thought the architect is the worst person to be the manager, because we're not, you know, historically we're not very good at it. But I think that's because we don't promote those skills. So yeah. I think the architects that are great managers are just as interesting and exciting as the guy that does the design personally, because you need everybody to do something brilliant. We can't all just do the drawing and turn it into reality. So I think it's partly our fault for not recognizing the whole team and the different skills that people have, and so that's why I want to try and revolutionize our lifelong learning to have those specialist skills rewarded. So the certificate you have on your wall every year tells the client what you're good at, what you're expert at. So we're not all being judged together. We're allowing people to have their expertise.
So I guess if we come back to your analogy about the doctors, at the moment you could say being a chartered architect is like a little bit like being a chartered GP. You're expected to do everything in the same way everywhere. Whereas what you're saying is we need to advocate to say, I'm now a chartered specialist in architectural project management or architectural account management or architectural design or architectural construction. Is that correct? Or?
Well, at least allowing that possibility, and encouraging it.
Yeah.
Because I think historically the reason why our education system produces generalists rather than specialists is because there's an awful lot of small architects. There's one-man bands in Colchester who have to do everything, or at least have to know everything. But I think I think that you're still going to need that, and I'm not saying everybody has to be. And in fact, the guy who's won this year's Royal Gold Medal, Neil McLaughlin, is a real all-round architect.
Right.
He's a craftsman.
Yep.
He's a businessman. He's a manager.
Yep.
He runs a team, and he's a brilliant designer.
Right.
So I know that those people still exist, but you do rely increasingly on knowing who to pull in for all of those to develop all of those talents. And this building that we're in at the moment, again, is just beautifully constructed, beautifully designed.
Yeah.
It's not earth-shatteringly experimental in terms of its design, in terms of its beauty in a way, but everybody loves it, and it's a fantastic advert for what architecture should be socially, and those. So I think, and the people that designed it have a team with amazing skills of how to put buildings together in a crafted way, and how to manage a project.
And so just for the listeners at home, or the viewers and the listeners, we're sat here in Appleby Blue, I could say it yesterday, and this is a residential home for people over the age of 65. It's also a charity, and it means that people who wouldn't normally be able to live here can afford to live here. And it's got an incredible community focus, and it won the Sterling Prize, the RIBA Sterling Prize.
Last year,
Would you like to tell us a little bit about, firstly, what the prize is? Because I know it's one of the flagships of the RIBA. And just generally tell us about why they won the prize.
Well, I was lucky enough to be on the judging committee, and we looked around 6 buildings, all very different, ranging from the AstraZeneca research headquarters in Cambridge, which was a wonderful, beautifully crafted all glass external by Herzog de Meuron, and all of them were very different. There were 2 houses on the shortlist, and then there was the Elizabeth Tower, which houses Big Ben at the House of Parliament, which had been refurbished and renovated. So, and what it does make you think, with alongside 5 other judges, is what does it say about architecture? What does it say about the current state of architecture? And why, when you're not comparing like for like, some of them are very small projects and some are very big. But the reason this one was because it just, to me, it just typifies everything that architecture is about. It has great social value. It's doing a purpose, it's serving a purpose. Everybody here that we spoke to loves it. The client is incredibly happy with it. It sits in a community, and it allows the people here to socialise as much as they want, or keep to themselves as much as they want. And the way that it's designed, and from the sustainability angle, the crafted angle, the materials, it's just wonderfully well thought through. So buildings like this are what attracted me into architecture in the first place. And I'm still as excited today as I am about these sorts of buildings and what they give to society and to the people that use it.
I found the magic of this building, because just as you said, it's been designed to fit into the local community. So it shouldn't stand out as that strange glass box in the middle of a lot of red brick houses. And it does that. It fits in incredibly well. But what I found was as soon as I arrived here, I felt welcome.
Yeah.
And just moving through, the gentleman that brought us up to this room, I just said to him, this reminds me of when I went to live in halls as a student. Yeah. It's a little bit fancier than the halls I lived in as a student, but it has that feeling of community, you know, that feeling of away from home, and now I'm part of a different team. And I don't know how they managed to do that, but I think that is what good architects can do. They have cues, design cues. I don't know if the roofs are higher or the corridors are wider or there's more glass, but somehow it just worked and you felt this positive feeling. Even though this is a residential home for many people, it might be the last place that they live, but it feels like it's going to be a great place to live, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it doesn't have corridors as such. It has streets which are protected, which become balconies. So it has all the things. So although it's essentially for elderly living, it's a great concept for a lot of different, so for students or for different kinds of community living.
Yeah.
It's a great model for lots of things. So, and so that's why it won the prize, because it's not only for being a brilliant building, but also what it says about what we as architects should be doing, I think.
And I think you guys, the architects, have got a real kind of a responsibility for the future. And I know the trend is going to be more and more towards urbanization. So maybe this model here is, as you say, something that we can also repeat for other parts of society. Because we all know that feeling of moving to a big town and feeling so alone. It's strange how you often hear that when somebody moved to a big city, they'd never felt so lonely. Certainly, I live in Germany, and people who've lived in Berlin for a few years often say that. I've never lived there. I've only been there for a few day trips, business or pleasure. But when people live there, they often say, oh, it's a very lonely place to be. And I can't really understand that. But again, the responsibility of architecture to create communities where people want to live and they can excel, that's not what the building company does, really, isn't it? It's not what the bank does that gives them money for the buildings. Yeah. It's where the architects come in, no?
Well, I think it's also to do with scale. I mean, you can do it, and it is done very well. I mean, I'm really interested in the government's agenda for the new towns. You know, that we're trying to build 1.5 million homes in the life of this parliament, and part of that is the new towns agenda. So I did a master's. I've done 2 master's degrees since I qualified as an architect. The first one talked about was on project management, and the second one was in urban design, because I thought, you know, as an architect trying to do bigger projects, you need to have more theoretical knowledge of urban design. So my dissertation for that course was on Milton Keynes, which was the last new town we built. And now, so we now have just approved 7 new towns the government have, and they're all sort of, if we're not careful, they're going to be dormitory towns. Yeah. And some of them look like they might be on the edge of the M25, and they're not going to be new towns at all in terms of communities.
Oh, it'll just be a new district of London.
And I think you need, a community needs to be designed properly. So you have jobs, you have health centres, you have schools, you have, you know, it's designed, it takes a lot to design a community, and that's what they've got right here. Yeah. So so you look at the old plans of London or old plans of the Noilly plan of Rome. Yeah. It's about getting the scale right, because we have, as people, although the technology has changed, we haven't changed as people very much at all. We still like the same sorts of spaces, and I think after the war, we got a lot of things wrong, just because we got technology that we could build higher, and we could, you know, build these great urban plazas. Yeah. People don't like them. They still like, you know, streets and communities and squares, and you know, I think architecture's in a really good place at the moment. We've learned a lot from those post-war mistakes. We're putting them right, and we're developing a really interesting future.
So I'd like to go into that and talk about the future of not just housing, the built environment, the future of urbanization. And really, to start off with, we need to say, we've got to talk about the elephant in the room. As you know, we're very passionate about sustainability. The building industry has one of the largest carbon footprints on the planet. Can we really afford, in terms of carbon, to build so many more houses? So I do hope you've enjoyed getting to know Chris a little bit better. In the next episode, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the future of urbanization, the future of the built environment. How are we going to live in the future? How is transport going to have an impact on that? Are we looking forward to some horrible dystopian thing like we've seen in many sci-fi movies? Or will there actually be a better version of the future than the one we've seen in the past? Chris has got some very, very optimistic views on that, and it's not just optimism in the sense of blind faith, it's optimism in the sense of somebody who spent his entire career working on exactly that subject. What are the environments that we'll live in the future? Do remember to subscribe to the YouTube or go over to patreon.com and subscribe there so that you can see all these different films.